Imagine, just imagine living in a city that is simultaneously this globally recognized cultural icon, right?
Oh, totally. Like the entertainment capital of the world.
Exactly. But at the exact same time, it's a massive, active industrial extraction zone.
Right. Which most people just, they don't see.
No, they don't. Like, what if I told you that right now, beneath the palm trees and the pristine pavement, there are over 700 active oil wells just churning away?
It's wild to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
And they are literally operating next to residential homes, high schools, hospitals.
Yeah, it completely shatters the illusion. I mean, when you look at the surface, you see Hollywood, right?
The glitz, the glamour.
Exactly. But when you look at the bedrock, you see this industrial engine that has been radically and honestly, sometimes violently engineered to dominate its own landscape.
Welcome to the deep dive. I'm thrilled to jump into this today.
Me too. We have so much to cover.
We really do.
Yeah.
Today, we are opening up a massive stack of encyclopedic source material. We're talking geological surveys, centuries of demographic records, urban planning archives, economic data.
A huge mountain of data.
Right. And we are unpacking the mechanical, structural reality of Los Angeles.
Yeah, and we should be clear about what we're doing here.
Oh, absolutely. I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener, right up front about our mission today. If you're here for, Hollywood cliches or celebrity real estate tours,
You are definitely in the wrong place.
yeah, you really are. We are looking far, far past the red carpets. We want to understand the machinery that actually runs this megacity.
Because, honestly, the reality is exponentially more fascinating than the fiction.
Totally.
We are going to decode the paradoxes of a place that is simultaneously a global economic titan. I mean, we're talking about a region boasting a gross metropolitan product of over $1.295 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
Trillion, yes. And yet, it's a city grappling with some of the most severe environmental and social crises in the modern world.
And to really grasp that, you have to realize that the problems Los Angeles faces today, like the paralyzing traffic, the stark housing shortages, none of these are accidents.
No, not at all.
For instance, the massive housing crisis the city is experiencing isn't just an organic result of too many people moving there.
Right, it's policy.
Exactly. The city actually intentionally downzoned itself decades ago. They artificially limited their own capacity to house their population.
And that is the core theme we see everywhere in the source material. Los Angeles is a product of massive scale, intentional policy and engineering decisions.
Yeah.
It is the absolute definition of geographical defiance.
Geographical defiance. I love that phrasing. Okay, so let's unpack this from the very foundation. We have to start with the terrain itself.
Right, the physical land.
Because long before the Spanish arrived, long before a single ounce of concrete was poured, the Tongfa people inhabited this basin.
Yes, and their historic center of power, their main settlement, was a village called Yanga.
Yanga. And the translation of that is pretty wild, right?
It really is. When you look at the linguistic history, the translation of that name is incredibly telling about the environment they were navigating. Yanga translates to place of the poison oak.
Which already sounds pretty hostile.
Right, but it has also been translated by early historians and linguists as the Valley of Smoke.
The Valley of Smoke. Wow.
Yeah.
I want you, the listener, to keep that specific phrase in the back of your mind. The Valley of Smoke. Because we are absolutely coming back to that later when we talk about modern ecology.
Oh, for sure. It's so relevant today.
It really is. But, okay, if we jump forward in the timeline to 1781, we see the formal founding of the city under Spanish rule.
Right.
A group of exactly 44 settlers, known as Los Pobladores, established a pueblo. And the original name of the settlement, well, it's a bit of a historical mouthful.
It is very long.
Yeah, and the exact phrasing is still heavily debated by scholars. But the historical consensus in our sources often cites it as El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de los Ángeles.
The town of Our Lady, the Queen of the Angels.
Right. A huge, grand name for 44 people.
It was, and what really stands out in the demographic records from 1781 is exactly who those 44 settlers were.
Right, because people have this image of, like, Spanish conquistadors.
Exactly. They weren't Spanish aristocrats. 2/3 of these settlers migrating from New Spain were categorized as mestizo or mulatto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, This meant they possessed a mixture of African, indigenous, and European ancestry.
So it was diverse from literally day one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The complex, incredibly diverse demographic DNA of Los Angeles wasn't something that developed in the 20th century. It was baked into the population from the very first day of its founding.
That sets the human stage perfectly. But let's look at the physical space they were trying to settle because, and I don't think people who haven't driven it realize this, it is punishing.
Oh, it's brutal.
Los Angeles today covers a 502.7 square mile grid. Massive. And when you look at the topographical maps, it is a landscape of absolute extremes. You've got these massive flat coastal basins, but then they are suddenly interrupted by incredibly rugged, isolating hill systems.
Right, they just shoot straight up.
Yeah. The city limits stretch 44 miles from north to south, and the elevation changes are just wild.
They really are.
I mean, you start at 0 feet at the Pacific Ocean, right?
The beach.
The beach. And you can travel entirely within the city limits all the way up to Mount Lukens, which peaks at 5,074 feet.
Yeah, still inside the city.
Still inside the city, over 5,000 feet up.
And those sudden changes in elevation, that's exactly what creates the city's dramatic microclimate.
Okay, right. Explain that a bit.
So the mountains essentially act as physical walls. They trap or block atmospheric conditions. Overall, Los Angeles is classified as having a Mediterranean-type semi-arid climate.
Which sounds lovely.
It does, but the localized variations are staggering because of this topography.
Right, so the geography literally dictates the weather block by block.
Exactly. I mean, you could be sitting out on the Santa Monica Pier in the middle of July. The ocean breeze is hitting the coast, and it's a perfectly temperate 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Beautiful day.
Beautiful. Meanwhile, drive just 15 miles inland.
Yeah, you take the freeway over the Santa Monica Mountains.
Right, and you drop down into the San Fernando Valley to a neighborhood like Canoga Park on that exact same July afternoon, and the temperature is suddenly 95 degrees.
Just brutal heat.
Exactly. The marine layer gets blocked by the mountains, and the geography just traps the inland heat.
Wow.
But as intense as the climate can be, the geological surveys point to a much more severe underlying reality.
Right, because the ground itself is basically a ticking clock.
Yeah, Los Angeles sits directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now, most people are familiar with the massive San Andreas fault system that passes right through the broader metropolitan area.
Sure, the big one.
Right. But what the geological sources emphasize are the blind thrust faults.
Okay, we need to pause and explain what a blind thrust fault actually is, because the name alone sounds terrifying.
It is pretty terrifying.
Usually, when we think of a fault line, we think of a crack in the ground you can actually see, right? Like a big fissure.
Correct. A traditional strike-slip fault often breaks the surface of the Earth. You can literally see the scar in the landscape.
Okay.
But a blind thrust fault is hidden completely underground.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Imagine pushing two sides of a thick rug together.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The rug bunches up and it folds, creating a sudden hill, right? But the fabric itself doesn't tear open at the top.
Right, it just bulges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The pressure just builds and builds deep beneath the surface until it suddenly snaps, forcing one massive chunk of bedrock violently upward over another.
Wow. So these tectonic pressure cookers are lurking directly beneath the densely populated city center, leaving absolutely no surface evidence until they rupture.
Precisely. And the region is constantly shifting. Southern California experiences about 10,000 minor earthquakes every single year.
10,000.
Every year. Now, the vast majority are way too small to feel, but they are a constant reminder that the ground beneath Los Angeles is fundamentally, structurally unstable.
So if we step back and look at this setup, you have a geographically isolated basin, surrounded by towering mountains, sitting on a massive invisible network of fault lines, dealing with extreme temperature swings. And critically, we haven't even mentioned this yet, virtually no natural year-round water supply.
None.
When you read the early history, it really sounds less like a traditional human settlement and much more like a sci-fi terraforming project on a hostile alien planet.
Honestly, that is the most accurate lens through which to view it.
Really?
Yes, Los Angeles is not a natural city in the way London or Paris grew organically around steady, navigable rivers.
Right, they had the Thames and the Seine.
Exactly. Los Angeles is a monument to brute force human engineering. The city leaders essentially forced a metropolis to exist where nature provided almost none of the necessary ingredients.
They just demanded it.
They did, and the ultimate foundational example of that terraforming is water.
Right, because by the year 1900, the population of the city hit about 102,000 people.
Yep.
And the local wells and the seasonal river were already completely exhausted. They were hitting a hard biological ceiling.
They were out of water. So the city brings in William Mulholland. He was the head of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Right.
And under his supervision, the city completes the Los Angeles Aqueduct in 1913.
Which is legendary.
Oh, it's monumental. Now, this wasn't just digging a deeper well. This was an unprecedented feat of engineering. Mulholland and his teams literally went over 200 miles north to eastern California, specifically the Owens Valley.
200 miles.
Over 200. And they built an aqueduct to siphon an entire river system.
An entire river.
They dragged that water across the Mojave Desert through mountains, relying entirely on gravity to dump it into the San Fernando Valley.
So they basically identified a lush agricultural valley hundreds of miles away, bought up all the land and water rights under, frankly, highly controversial circumstances,
Very controversial.
and essentially stole a river to make their own desert bloom.
It was ruthless, and it was wildly successful for Los Angeles. But the historical texts reveal a fascinating legal mechanism here that people miss.
Oh.
Yeah. Because of the way the city charter was written, Los Angeles was legally prohibited from selling that imported aqueduct water to independent outside municipalities.
Wait, really? They couldn't just sell it to their neighbors?
Nope, it was illegal.
Ah. So this is where the massive sprawl begins.
Yes. If neighboring agricultural communities in the basin wanted access to this new, abundant water supply, they couldn't just buy it. They had to vote to allow themselves to be politically annexed by the city of Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. So the aqueduct didn't just quench the city's thirst. It was literally the geopolitical weapon they used to conquer the surrounding landscape.
Exactly.
That's how they swelled the city limits to the massive 502 square miles we see today.
Precisely. They bought land with water.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
But the terraforming didn't stop with just importing water, did it?
Yeah.
They also had to go to war with the water that was naturally there.
Right, the Los Angeles River.
Yeah.
Before human intervention, it was a wildly unpredictable seasonal waterway. During dry months, it was a trickle. You could walk across it.
Right.
But during the winter rains, the water would rush down from the San Gabriel Mountains and the river would violently change course.
It's like overflow its banks.
Worse, it would carve completely new paths. It created massive, devastating floods across the flat basin, just wiping out homes and infrastructure.
Well, you can't build a reliable real estate market if the river decides to move its banks by 2 miles every winter.
No, you definitely can't.
So what did the engineering hubris of the early 20th century decide to do? They brought in the Army Corps of Engineers, and over a period of a few decades, they completely straightened the river out.
They did.
They paved 51 miles of it in solid concrete.
It's hard to even picture 51 miles of concrete river.
It is. They essentially took a vibrant, natural riparian ecosystem and turned it into a giant, sterile storm drain.
It was an incredible feat of flood control, yes, but an absolute ecological tragedy. They neutralized the threat of the landscape by smothering it in concrete.
Smothering it. You know, looking at this early history, I have to wonder if this foundational hubris, this deeply ingrained civic belief that we can just engineer our way out of nature's constraints with enough concrete and imported water, did that set the genetic code for all of LA's future structural problems?
If we look at the overarching historical patterns in our sources, the answer is a resounding yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. When your foundational myth relies on conquering geography rather than adapting to it, you build urban systems that are inherently fragile.
That makes sense.
They require constant, massive, expensive intervention just to maintain an artificial equilibrium. And as we see in the later data, when those systems are stressed, the breakdown is catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Which brings us to the next massive intervention. You can't talk about terraforming an entire basin without talking about the fuel required to power all those earth-moving machines, right?
Right.
And all those newly annexed miles of straw. Water gave Los Angeles life, but another liquid entirely dictated the blueprint of how it was built.
Let's pivot to oil.
Let's talk about oil.
The discovery of petroleum within the city limits in 1892 was an absolute paradigm shift.
Cheers.
Edward Doheny and his partner literally dug a well with picks and shovels near present-day Dodger Stadium.
So picks and shovels.
Yeah, and they hit a massive gusher. It completely changed the economic trajectory of the region. By 1923, the state of California was the country's largest oil producer.
Wow.
They were generating about a quarter of the entire world's petroleum output, much of it right from the Los Angeles basin.
A quarter of the world's output. And I think what most people completely miss is that this isn't just sepia-toned ancient history.
No, it's very present.
This extraction is still happening right under people's feet today. Our sources show that Los Angeles is home to the nation's largest urban oil field.
It is a staggering juxtaposition of land use.
It really is. Right now, there are over 700 active oil wells located within 1,500 feet of residential homes, churches, public schools, and hospitals.
1,500 feet, that's nothing.
It's basically the house next door. And sometimes these pump jacks are hidden inside windowless fake office buildings.
Right, they disguise them.
Yeah, or they hide them behind tall fences
Yeah.
right in the middle of dense neighborhoods.
And it's not benign. The EPA has actually released reports voicing severe concerns about the toxic fumes, the groundwater risks, and the long-term health impacts on the communities living essentially on top of this industrial machinery.
It really highlights the dual nature of the city.
It does.
But historically, that endless supply of cheap, local oil is exactly what fueled the city's incredible industrial boom, particularly when the timeline hits World War II.
Right.
During the 1940s, Los Angeles transformed overnight into a wartime manufacturing juggernaut. The logistics of this era are just mind-blowing.
Okay.
You have the California Shipbuilding Corporation, or CalShip, operating out of Terminal Island.
Yep.
They were churning out hundreds of Liberty and Victory ships for the war effort. The pace was frantic,
Frantic is the right word.
and the aircraft manufacturing sector was even bigger. The records show that in one single year during the war, the factories in Los Angeles produced more airplanes than the entire aviation industry had produced in all the pre-war years combined.
Wow.
Yeah, going all the way back to the Wright brothers' first flight in 1903.
Yeah.
One single year produced more than all of that.
That is an unbelievable statistic. You had massive, sprawling complexes for Douglas Aircraft, Hughes, Lockheed, Northrop. The city was practically smothered in an avalanche of industrial production.
Smothered in a good way, economically.
Economically, yes. And that manufacturing boom brought an unprecedented influx of new residents. Millions of people migrating for factory jobs.
Which meant the city leadership needed a mechanism to organize all this rapid, chaotic growth.
Exactly. Which leads us directly to a seemingly mundane bureaucratic decision that ended up fundamentally shaping the physical and social reality of the LA we know today. Let's talk about the birth of zoning.
Zoning. Let's get into it.
Back in 1908, Los Angeles actually created the first municipal zoning ordinance in the United States.
The very first one.
The first one. They explicitly drew lines on a map to separate industrial zones from residential zones.
Which, if we are being fair, sounds incredibly logical on the surface. I mean, if the city is exploding with heavy manufacturing, you want to keep the slaughterhouses, the chemical plants, and the explosives warehouses away from where children are sleeping.
Exactly. The initial logic was basic public health and safety.
Right.
But as the mid-century economy boomed and the state began pouring money into the expansion of the interstate highway system in the 1950s and 60s, the logic behind zoning evolved. It turned into something much more insidious and restrictive.
The freeways changed everything.
They did.
And what gets lost in the modern narrative, and this always shocks people who visit today, is that LA used to have the largest privately owned electrified rail system in the world.
Oh, the red cars.
The Pacific Electric Railway, known as the Red Cars. It wasn't always a city where you had to own an automobile to survive.
That is a crucial point for our listeners to understand. They had over 1,000 miles of track connecting the basin.
Over 1,000 miles.
Yes. But the massive federal subsidies for freeways, combined with a cultural obsession with the automobile, signaled the rapid demise of the rail system.
They just tore it out.
The city gleefully dismantled its own public transit to make way for the car. And this is exactly where the zoning policies took a very dark turn.
How so?
Well, in the late 20th century, the city leadership made a deliberate structural policy choice to radically reduce the amount of housing that could legally be built.
This is the concept of downzoning. It's mentioned all over our source material. And we really need to clearly define the mechanics of this for you, the listener, because it sounds like boring bureaucratic paperwork. But it is the literal smoking gun for the modern housing crisis.
It absolutely is. So downzoning is a legal change to the municipal code that reduces the allowable density on a piece of land.
Okay, give us an example.
Imagine a vacant lot. Under older zoning laws, a developer might have the legal right to build, say, a 10-story apartment building with 50 units on that lot.
Great, 50 homes.
Right. But if the city downzones that neighborhood, they change the law so that only a single-family house can be built on that exact same lot.
Wow.
You are legally erasing potential homes from the future.
And the scale at which Los Angeles did this is terrifying.
Oh, the numbers are grim.
According to the Urban Planning Archives, in 1960, the city of Los Angeles was actually zoned with enough capacity to legally house roughly 10 million people.
10 million.
It was primed for massive, dense growth.
But by 1990, through a series of relentless, localized policy decisions driven by neighborhood groups, the city banned high-density housing across vast swaths of the map.
They just outlawed it.
They did. They prioritized the preservation of single-family neighborhoods above all else. In just 30 years, the city's legal capacity for housing plummeted from 10 million down to just 4.5 million.
I have to push back on the city's underlying logic here, because economically, it is suicidal.
It makes no sense on paper.
Think about this. It's like building the world's largest, most attractive theme park. You advertise it globally with the allure of Hollywood, you build massive ports, you invite millions of people to come work in your booming aerospace and tech industries.
No, right.
But then you deliberately board up half the turnstiles so only a fraction of the people can actually get inside. If the city was booming economically, why artificially choke off its own capacity to house its essential workers?
Because the homeowners who are already established there recognize that scarcity increases value.
Right.
Exactly. They wanted to preserve a very specific, idealized type of suburban lifestyle, the detached single-family home with a front lawn and a two-car garage.
The American dream.
Right, even as the regional population continued to swell by millions. This downzoning was a massive legal mechanism that intentionally stunted vertical growth. It made it illegal to build apartment buildings in most of the city.
Which means the only way the city could grow was outward.
Precisely. It cemented Los Angeles' famous horizontal sprawl.
Just endless suburbs.
Right. It forced development further and further out into the desert and the valleys, requiring more freeways and more cars. But more importantly, downzoning laid the direct mathematical groundwork for the massive affordability crisis the city faces today.
Supply and demand.
It is basic economics. When you artificially restrict the supply of a necessary good, in this case, housing, while the demand from a growing economy is skyrocketing, the prices will absolutely explode.
So this artificial restriction on housing capacity, combined with a rapidly expanding, globally connected economy, created an immense geographic pressure cooker.
A huge one.
You've got this incredibly diverse, massive population pouring into the basin for work, but they are forced to navigate a structurally rigid, horizontally sprawling city where land is becoming impossibly expensive.
And that pressure cooker dynamic is essential to understanding the human tapestry of the city today.
Let's dive deep into the demographics of that human tapestry, because the numbers in the census data are fascinating, but we need to understand the stories behind them.
Let's look at the numbers first.
Okay, the 2020 census put the city proper at about 3.89 million people.
Right.
Although, interestingly, the latest 2025 estimates show it slightly shrinking to 3.86 million, making it currently the fastest shrinking among large U.S. counties.
Which is a direct result of that housing affordability crisis we just discussed.
Exactly. People just can't afford to stay. But the diversity of the people who remain is unparalleled. The broad breakdown is roughly 47.2% Hispanic, 28.3% non-Hispanic white, 12% Asian, and 8.5% Black.
And you experience that diversity not just in the data, but audibly on the streets. Linguistic surveys show that well over 200 distinct languages are spoken in Los Angeles.
Over 200.
Yes. Over 56% of residents speak a language other than English in their homes.
And what's entirely unique about Los Angeles is how this incredible diversity manifests itself physically, spatially, across the grid.
The neighborhoods.
Right. You have these massive cultural pillars, these distinct ethnic enclaves that operate almost like cities within the city. Koreatown, historic Filipino town, Tarangelis, Little Tokyo, Little Ethiopia. We aren't just talking about a few restaurants here. We are talking about massive global populations.
The statistics are remarkable. Los Angeles contains the second largest Mexican, Armenian, Salvadoran, Filipino, and Guatemalan populations of any city in the world.
In the world.
In the world, and it holds the absolute largest Japanese, Iranian, Cambodian, and Romani populations in the entire United States.
And we need to look at why these enclaves formed.
Yeah.
Take Tarangelis, for example, on the west side. That wasn't an organic, slow migration over centuries. That was a sudden, massive influx of Iranian immigrants fleeing the 1979 Islamic Revolution, arriving in a city that already had a nascent community network to support them.
Exactly. These enclaves are survival mechanisms and cultural preservation tools for people navigating a vast, disconnected sprawl.
And that deep cultural embedding extends heavily into the religious landscape as well.
Massively. Los Angeles is home to the largest Roman Catholic archdiocese in the country.
Wow.
It has the second largest Jewish population in the U.S., numbering around 621,000 people.
That's huge.
It is. It also hosts the greatest variety of Buddhist sects and temples anywhere in the world outside of Asia.
But we have to be honest with the history here. This incredible diversity has never existed in a frictionless vacuum.
No, it hasn't.
That geographic and economic pressure cooker we talked about earlier has blown its lid several times. The city has a deep, violently painful history of racial and civil unrest.
Yes, the historical friction is intense.
The 1965 Watts riots, which resulted in 34 deaths and massive destruction, sparked by a traffic stop but rooted in decades of police brutality and housing discrimination.
Right.
Then the 1992 Rodney King riots, sparked by the acquittal of LAPD officers caught on tape beating a black motorist, which resulted in widespread fires and over $1 billion in property damage.
And the historical friction continues into the present day. Looking at the geopolitical sources from June 2025, we see this friction play out directly at the federal level.
Okay, lay that out for us.
In June 2025, major protests and riots erupted across the city following a wave of IC raids. The federal administration explicitly targeted Los Angeles' status as a sanctuary city, deploying federal agents, the Army National Guard, and U.S. Marines into the city without the consent of the local municipal government.
So, relying exactly on our sources, this is a stark, modern illustration of the intense, ongoing clashes between local demographic realities, a sanctuary city largely populated by immigrants, and sweeping federal mandates.
Yes, that's exactly what the data shows.
But if we zoom in from the federal level, what does this friction look like, block by block?
This is where we see the most devastating consequences of the spatial segregation we mentioned. You have to understand that the distinct enclaves we see today weren't always formed by choice.
Right.
Historically, Los Angeles enforced intense racial segregation through a legal mechanism known as restrictive housing covenants.
Let's explain exactly what a restrictive covenant is, because it sounds like ancient history, but it absolutely shaped the map we use today.
It did.
A restrictive covenant was a legally binding clause written directly into the deed of a house. It explicitly stated that the property could never be sold or rented to anyone who wasn't Caucasian.
Written right into the deed.
Yeah. If you were Black, Asian, or Mexican, it was literally illegal for you to buy a home in vast swaths of the city.
Exactly. And because these covenants blocked minority populations from moving into the expanding newly built suburbs, they violently forced the Black community, in particular, into a tightly constrained geographic area, South Los Angeles.
They boxed them in.
They did. Because it was one of the few places they were legally allowed to live, South LA emerged over the decades as the largest, most vibrant African-American community in the western United States.
But the tragedy compounding that history is what's happening right now. Today, those legal covenants are long gone, but the economic pressures of the housing crisis, the legacy of the 1990 downzoning, are causing massive demographic displacement.
Yes, the data on this is striking.
Due to relentless gentrification and the soaring cost of rent in those once redlined neighborhoods, the African-American population is currently the fastest declining demographic in the city.
They are being economically priced out of the very neighborhoods they were historically forced into.
When people talk about American cities, they love to use the cliche of the melting pot.
Right, the grand melting pot.
But looking at this spatial map of LA and the history of redlining, zoning, and freeways, the melting pot metaphor completely fails.
It really does.
It's more like looking at a concrete labyrinth. Think about the massive freeway systems. If you've ever sat in LA traffic, you might assume they just didn't build enough lanes.
Right, that's the common thought.
But those freeways act as physical concrete walls. They were intentionally routed to bypass, sever, or demolish specific minority communities, acting as barriers rather than connectors. Does the physical sprawl of the city actually prevent true integration?
That is the defining structural question of Los Angeles. The physical environment dictates the social reality. The sprawl absolutely creates physical and psychological barriers.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to drive a personal vehicle everywhere, which means you can easily pass through a dozen distinct neighborhoods at 60 miles an hour on an elevated concrete overpass without ever actually interacting with the people on the ground.
You never even roll down your window.
Exactly. The cultural enclaves are incredibly vital for providing community support, but the vastness of the geography and the reliance on cars fundamentally reinforces a culture of isolation.
So you have this hyper-segmented, isolated population navigating a vast, sprawling grid. But simultaneously, they are the labor engine driving one of the most powerful and yet deeply divided economies on planet Earth.
Yes.
Let's examine the glamour and the grind. Let's look at the stark economic bifurcation of Los Angeles.
The sheer scale of the wealth generated in this basin is almost hard to comprehend. As we noted at the beginning, the region generates a gross metropolitan product of nearly $1.3 trillion.
And just to clarify the terminology for the listener, gross metropolitan product, or GMP, is basically the local version of GDP.
Right.
It measures the value of all the goods and services produced within the metropolitan area in a single year. And a $1.3 trillion GMP means the economy of Los Angeles is larger than the economies of most entire countries.
It's massive.
It's the third largest economic metropolitan area in the world, behind only New York and Tokyo.
And crucially, that wealth isn't just coming from the entertainment industry. The logistical infrastructure is massive.
The ports.
Yes. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach combined operate as the fifth busiest port complex in the world, and by far the busiest in the United States.
I mean, you look at the water and it's just endless cargo ships.
Millions of shipping containers pass through there every year. They're the massive, industrial, beating heart of maritime trade within the Pacific Rim.
And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, from heavy maritime logistics, you have the creative capital aspect of the economy.
Right.
The data shows that an astonishing 1 in 6 residents in the Los Angeles area works in a creative industry.
1 in 6.
There are more artists, writers, filmmakers, designers, and musicians living and working here than in any other city at any time in recorded human history.
It's historically unprecedented.
It manifests physically in the landscape with incredible cultural landmarks. You've got 841 museums, the most per capita of any city in the U.S.
That's a great stat.
You have architectural marvels like the Getty Center sitting on a hill or the stainless steel curves of the Walt Disney Concert Hall downtown. It is an absolute cultural powerhouse.
But we have to look at the structural reality beneath those shiny statistics, because the economy of Los Angeles operates like a barbell.
A barbell. I like that analogy.
Yeah, you have a massive accumulation of high-paying jobs on one end, tech, entertainment, finance, and a massive accumulation of low-paying jobs on the other, service, hospitality, warehouse logistics.
Right.
The middle class has been completely hollowed out.
And what does that hollowed out middle mean for the physical city? Because the contrast between that trillion-dollar wealth and the economic reality on the ground is jarring.
It's very visible.
Look at commercial real estate. At the end of the second quarter in 2024, downtown Los Angeles recorded a staggering 31.5% office vacancy rate.
Nearly a third empty.
Post-pandemic remote work shifts, combined with exorbitant commercial rents, have hollowed out the high-rises. You have skyscrapers sitting a third empty, a ghost town in the sky.
Right.
And on the street level, below those empty towers, you have the most visible, tragic manifestation of the crisis.
Homelessness. The numbers provided in the source reports are devastating. As of January 2024, there are officially 45,252 unhoused people living within the city limits.
45,000.
Yes. The epicenter of this crisis is Skid Row, a specific neighborhood downtown containing 8,000 homeless individuals. It represents one of the largest stable populations of homeless people anywhere in the country.
And the data tears down the common misconceptions about why this is happening. The surveys show us exactly what the pipeline to the street looks like.
This is so important.
Almost 60% of the people who became newly homeless in 2019 cited straightforward economic hardship as the primary cause.
Just running out of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not addiction, not mental illness is the initial trigger, but simply the inability to afford rent. And the legacy of the redlining and segregation we discussed earlier is glaringly obvious in the demographics of the unhoused. Black people in Los Angeles are roughly 4 times more likely to experience homelessness than the general population.
If we synthesize all the data we've discussed so far, you have to trace this crisis directly back to the 1990 downzoning.
It always comes back to the zoning.
It does. By intentionally legally capping the housing supply, the city created an environment defined by artificial scarcity. As a result, the median house price today is a staggering $879,500.
Almost $1 million for a median home.
Right. Average rent hovers near $1,900 for a basic apartment. When you combine a barbell economy with a housing supply that has been deliberately choked off by policy for 30 years, mass homelessness isn't an unpredictable anomaly. It is the cold mathematical outcome of the equation.
It's a brutal daily juxtaposition. Think about walking down the street. You have Frank Gehry designed architectural masterpieces and restaurants charging hundreds of dollars a plate, located just blocks away from 8,000 human beings living in tents and makeshift shelters on Skid Row.
Yeah.
I had to ask you to analyze the intent here. Is this devastating inequality a glitch in the LA economic system? Or is the system functioning exactly the way it was zoned, designed, and legislated to function?
That is the most uncomfortable truth embedded in the urban planning archives.
Yeah?
It is not a glitch. When a city intentionally uses zoning laws to protect low-density homeowner wealth at the explicit expense of regional housing capacity, extreme inequality is the feature, not the bug.
The feature, not the bug.
Right. The municipal system is operating exactly as the policy parameters dictate. It was designed to exclude, and it is executing that exclusion perfectly.
So as Los Angeles grapples with these extreme highs of unimaginable wealth and devastating lows of systemic poverty, the city is racing against a very public ticking clock.
The world is watching.
Because the entire world is coming to LA, and the city has to frantically reinvent its infrastructure for the global stage once again. Let's examine this ongoing reinvention. We need to look at transit, ecology, and the looming deadline of 2028.
Okay, let's start with transit. The daily infrastructure reality for the average Angelino right now is, frankly, grim.
Very grim.
In 2019, mobility data showed that Los Angeles drivers lost an average of 119 hours a year to sitting paralyzed in traffic.
119 hours.
That's nearly 5 full days of a human life every single year lost to the freeway. It is the defining negative psychological experience of living in the basin.
But, and this is where the narrative shifts, contrary to the persistent 1980s stereotype that nobody walks in LA and everyone just drives a convertible, there is a massive, multi-billion-dollar public transit boom currently underway.
There really is. It is a radical attempt to reverse the mistakes of the mid-20th century. The LA Metro currently runs the second largest bus network in the United States.
Second largest.
Yeah, and they operate the busiest light rail system in the country. Historic Union Station downtown sees over 1 million Amtrak boardings a year. The city is currently pouring unprecedented billions of dollars into aggressively expanding the subway and rail networks, desperately trying to reconnect a city they spent decades tearing apart for cars.
And alongside this transit evolution, there's a deeply complex ecological evolution taking place.
Yes.
If you look back to the historical environmental data from the 1970s, the geography of the basin of those mountains trapping the air created a perfect bowl for smog.
Right, the microclimates trapping the pollution.
The temperature inversions trapped the car exhaust so badly that the city recorded over 100 stage 1 smog alerts a year. Children literally weren't allowed to play outside because breathing the air was hazardous.
Which is terrifying.
Today, because of incredibly aggressive environmental policies, the invention of the catalytic converter, and strict California emission standards, those stage 1 alerts have dropped to near zero.
It is an incredible, undeniable victory for environmental regulation. It proves that massive systemic problems can be engineered away with the right policy.
It does.
But nature, in a terraformed environment, always has a new curveball. As global climate change accelerates, the city is facing new, highly volatile threats.
Like the fires.
Exactly. Take the devastating Pacific Palisades fire in January 2025. It was driven by severe Santa Ana winds, hot, dry winds whipping down through the mountain passes, and it destroyed entire neighborhoods in a matter of hours. The interface between the built sprawl and the highly flammable natural chaparral is becoming a massive liability.
And yet, despite the concrete, the freeways, and the fires, nature finds a way to adapt to the sprawl.
It always does.
The biological surveys of the city are fascinating. You have this incredible urban wildlife surviving in the margins. There was a documented urban population of bobcats that are dealing with mange because they are ingesting rat poison that accumulates up the urban food chain. But they are surviving in fragmented hillside habitats.
Urban bobcats.
Yeah. You have apex predators like mountain lions learning to navigate the massive concrete freeway systems to find new hunting corridors.
The wildlife is adapting to the terraformed city just as much as the humans are.
It's amazing. I look at those resilient freeway navigating urban mountain lions and bobcats and I think that's the Angelinos themselves.
That's a great analogy.
Life finds a way, even in a hostile concrete basin. But the biggest forcing function for all of this rapid change, billions in transit expansion, the attempts at greening the grid, is coming up incredibly fast.
The 2028 Summer Olympics.
The Olympics.
Los Angeles will join London and Paris as the only cities in world history to host the Games 3 times. They hosted previously in 1932 and 1984.
Right.
And from an economic standpoint, it's worth noting that the 32 and 84 Games in Los Angeles are widely considered by economists to be among the only Olympic Games in modern history to ever actually turn a significant profit.
Which is rare for the Olympics.
Very rare, mostly because they utilized existing infrastructure rather than building massive new stadiums that would just sit empty afterward.
But this time feels structurally different. I have to push on this optimism. Is the massive 2028 Olympic push actually going to fix the deep structural issues of Los Angeles?
That's the question.
Are the new rail lines going to solve the traffic, the housing shortage, the inequality? Or is this massive influx of capital just going to be a temporary facelift, sweeping the unhoused population out of sight through aggressive policing, painting the concrete green, and putting on a sanitized show for the international television cameras?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question that urban planners are debating right now.
What does the data suggest?
Well, the Olympics act as a hard, immovable deadline. It forces notoriously slow local bureaucracies to accelerate infrastructure projects that might otherwise languish for decades.
So the trains will get built?
The rail lines will be built faster, yes. But whether a 2-week sporting event can magically undo the deep structural inequalities cemented by 30 years of downzoning and 50 years of car-centric sprawl, historical precedent suggests we should remain highly skeptical.
Right.
It is a massive opportunity to build out public bigs, but it is absolutely not a magic wand for systemic poverty.
So as we wrap up, let's bring all these massive systemic threads together and zoom out. We've taken a long journey today in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started in a terraformed, engineered basin, exploring how incredible human hubris literally stole a river and paved over an ecosystem to make a hostile desert bloom.
We moved through an era of explosive, oil-fueled industrial sprawl, examining how deliberate exclusionary zoning decisions violently choked off the housing supply and cemented a physical culture of isolation.
Into a present reality that is hyper-diverse, functioning as an absolute global cultural and economic titan, but one that is fundamentally fractured by stark economic bifurcation and a devastating policy-driven homelessness crisis.
All of which leads to this desperate current race to build out a modern mass transit system and frantically reinvent itself as a functional green megacity before the world arrives on its doorstep in 2028.
And for you listening to this, I want to address why this matters. Why should you, sitting wherever you are, care about the history of Los Angeles' zoning laws, or its blind thrust faults, or its aqueducts?
That's a fair question.
Because understanding Los Angeles isn't just about collecting trivia. It's about seeing the ultimate high-stakes test case for modern human civilization.
Precisely. Every major growing metropolis on Earth is watching Los Angeles.
They are.
How do we solve massive housing affordability crises caused by restrictive zoning? How do we manage extreme climate events in heavily populated areas?
Right.
How do we successfully build mass transit in a fiercely car-dominated culture? How do we support and protect hyperdiversity while simultaneously combating extreme wealth inequality? Los Angeles is the laboratory for the 21st century city.
It is the vanguard. But as we look to the future of that laboratory, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, and it brings us all the way back to the very beginning of our timeline.
The indigenous history.
Exactly. Think back to the indigenous Tongva people. They called this basin Yanga. And as we mentioned hours ago, one of the primary translations of that ancient name is the Valley of Smoke.
The Valley of Smoke.
Fast forward to today. You have a massive megacity that spent the entire 20th century battling trapped toxic smog.
Yes.
You have the devastating historic Pacific Palisades fires of January 2025, turning the sky dark. You have the constant yearly threat of the hot Santa Ana winds whipping through the dry, highly flammable chaparral that surrounds the millions of homes.
It's all connected.
As global climate change accelerates, increasing the heat and the drought in the region, it raises a profound, almost eerie question.
What's that?
After centuries of pouring millions of tons of concrete, building massive aqueducts across deserts, meticulously separating zones on maps, and aggressively engineering our way out of every single natural constraint, after all of that relentless attempt to tame the landscape, is nature finally forcing Los Angeles to revert back to its original true identity, the Valley of Smoke?
Wow.
Think about those hidden blind thrust faults waiting underneath the pavement. Sometimes, no matter how hard human engineering tries to build a clean, rigid structure on the surface, the immense volatile power of the natural landscape beneath simply refuses to be contained.